Moin Moin and welcome to Ralfs Foto-Bude. Some weeks ago I presented the new Nikon D750 full frame sensor, 24 megapixel, and in my video I said that I want to show a little bit more about some special functions, especially about the autofocus system and the opportunities of the autofocus of the D750. And that's what I want to do now. First of all, on the front side of the camera we have a small lever, and there you can change between the autofocus and the manual setting. So this is manual focus, this is autofocus, and we have a button in the middle of this lever where we can change the different autofocus settings. And that's what I want to do now, and want to show you which different settings you have. You turn the camera on, press the info button, you get the most important informations here on the back side of the camera, and there you also see the autofocus, AFC and 3D, and that's we want to change now. So if I press the button on the front side while the camera is on autofocus, you will see that we have two lines here. The first line says AF area mode and the second focus mode. And the signs here at the end of the line says you can change the focus mode with the back dial, that's the one here, and you can change the autofocus area mode with the front dial, that's the one here where you hold the camera on the front side of the camera. So let's have a look to the different focus modes. First of all, we have AFS, that's autofocus single. Autofocus single you always use if you have still scenes where there's not so many movement, like portraits, landscape, cities, still life, stuff like this. Let's autofocus single. The camera out of focus on the certain point, you press the shutter release and you get the picture crisp, clear and sharp. That's the autofocus single, and that's when you use autofocus single. Next one is AFC. C is continuous. Autofocus continuous you use always if you have moving objects in the scene, if you have running kids, playing dogs or stuff like this. Also if you make a sport photography, very important, then you use AFC. Everything which is moving in your scene and you want to get it sharp, therefore you use autofocus continuous, because you set the autofocus point and the camera tries to set the autofocus point during the subject is moving, and sets the autofocus point on the subject so you get a crisp and clear sharp picture. Very important when you use autofocus continuous. The cameras try to predict in which direction the subject is moving, towards you or away from you, and the autofocus tries to move the point a little bit forward or backward, so the camera gets it in focus when you press the shutter release. The camera tries to predict how fast the subject is and knows the time between you press the shutter release and you get the picture, so the autofocus moves a little bit forward or backward, so you get a crisp and clear and sharp picture even if the subject is moving towards you or if the subject is going away from you. So therefore you need the autofocus C. The last point is AFA, autofocus automatic. If you use autofocus automatic, the camera tries to recognize, is it a single, so is it a steady scene, or it's a moving autofocus continuous, and the camera changes between AFS and AFC automatically. In my opinion, I don't use the AFA automatic because I know before I take the picture if I have a scene which is good for AFS or if I have a scene which is good for AFC. So I decide by myself and don't want to give the camera the decision to decide between AFS and AFC, because focus is the most important fact to get a real good picture. If you work in RAW and the picture is a little bit underexposed or overexposed, doesn't matter. If you work in RAW, you have the opportunity to change it a little bit in Lightroom to make the picture a little bit brighter, or you can change almost everything in Lightroom, but you can't change one thing, and that's the sharpness. So the sharpness is very, very important and the most important thing, and the one thing you can't change in the post-production. So, and that's the reason for me that I use AFS and AFC by myself and don't let the camera decide to change between AFS or AFC. So that's the reason why I personally don't use the option AFA. Next point is the area mode, and therefore we go in the autofocus single option first. This is the smallest area we have, so this is autofocus single with a small field. And if you look carefully here in the viewfinder, it's a little bit difficult to see, but you see there is one small autofocus field, one of 51 autofocus fields, and this one you can move at a position you want it just by pressing the four-way button here. Very important, to move the autofocus field, you have to change it from the L position, L means lock, to the unlock position that's here, and then if you see and look carefully here on top, you can see how I can move the autofocus field in the autofocus area of 51 points. Going back to the setting, so we have the 1 point autofocus, then we have 1 point with 4 help points. These points are around the one autofocus point, and it's very useful if you have a scene where the autofocus point is a little bit small, or if you have a scene where the subject may be moving a little bit and you want also to get it in focus, and therefore these 4 points are very helpful to hold the autofocus just in the right position. If you make portrait and want to get the autofocus perfectly on the eye, you should use the single autofocus point, so you don't have the chance to set the autofocus on the nose or anywhere else. If you have this small fine area like in portrait, the eye, you should use the single autofocus field. If you have other scenes where it doesn't matter to get also the points around, like a city shooting in the city or a landscape, there you can use the option with the 4 help points around the center autofocus point. You can still move this point around. Maybe you can see it here. We have the, yes, if you look carefully to the viewfinder, you see the 4 help points, and I can move them around like the 1 point, like the single point. In the middle of these 4 points, there's the single autofocus point, and that's the autofocus point, which is the major autofocus point. Okay, next option is the whole field. So there you get the 51 autofocus fields, and the camera decides by herself which one is the right autofocus field. You see now it's red because I don't get on focus here. When I go to the table, there's no no chance to get an autofocus. But usually when you take a picture of landscape or stuff like this, the camera selects the focus points by herself and highlight them red, so you see exactly which autofocus point the camera used to get the sharp focus. So these are the different settings in autofocus: single, full, single, single with 4 help points. So these are the three settings in the autofocus single mode. Coming now to the autofocus continuous mode. We also have the 51 fields in the autofocus continuous mode. We also have the single point in the autofocus continuous. And now we have 9, 21 and 51 autofocus fields. What does this mean? We have the center autofocus field, which you can move around. But then we have 9 dynamic autofocus fields, 9, 21 or 51 dynamic autofocus fields. You can imagine if you want to take a picture of a moving car which comes in front to you or towards you, sometimes it's very difficult to focus perfect on the car, to set the one focus point exactly and perfect to the car or to the moving subject. And therefore you have the help points or the dynamic points. And the dynamic points help to hold the autofocus at the level or at the point where you want it and don't focus to the background of the scene. And therefore you can decide if you want to have a 9, 21 or 51 dynamic autofocus points. It depends on the scene. You have to try this one. It's a little bit difficult to decide just before which one you have use if you don't know how they work. So work with them, try in different scenes the different options, 9, 21 or 51. As faster the subject is, as faster the subject is, as more dynamic autofocus fields you should use. So if you have a real fast moving subject, you should use the 51. If you have a little slower where you can follow the subject by yourself, you should use the 9 dynamic autofocus fields. Next point in the autofocus setting, after the 9, 21, 51 autofocus fields, that's the 3D autofocus. And in the 3D autofocus, you point on a certain point in the scene, and the camera tries to follow this when it moves from the left to the right, from the left to the right. A traditional thing is a tennis player who runs from left to right, and the camera tries to follow these subject, tries to follow the autofocus or the focus and moves from the right to the left and from the right to the left. But it works only if it moves like this. It don't work if it moves towards or away from you. It's only when it's in a certain distance from you, and not fixed but almost fixed distance from you, then you can use the 3D mode for focusing. Next point, when we go to the area mode, is again the center focus or the single focus with 4 help points. That's exactly the same which you have in the autofocus single mode. So these are the different autofocus settings which you can use. You can move the autofocus point with the forward button, as I said before. Important, unlock this one here. If it's locked, you can't move the autofocus point. Next very important point is in the menu, and that's one point you should check and you should work with it. That's in the custom setting menu. If you go here to the point A, autofocus, you will see we have A1, autofocus, C priority selection, autofocus, S priority selection. What does it mean? You can change here between release and focus, and you can also change in this point between release and focus. What does it mean? If I work in autofocus single, and I want to make a portrait, or I want to make a still life or something like this, I want to set the focus perfect on the point, and I want to get a clear, crisp and absolutely sharp picture. And therefore my priority is focus. I don't want that the release button works before the focus is perfectly on the scene and on the point. And therefore when I go into the menu, I use the AFS priority selection on focus. because I want a crisp and absolutely sharp picture when I work in autofocus single. When I work in autofocus continuous, normally I shoot action, I shoot running kids, my running dog, playing dog, sport photography. Usually I use the continuous shooting mode, so I change here from single shooting to continuous low or to continuous high, depends on the scene I have. And so I want that the camera makes picture by picture by picture, and I want a lot of pictures. And I accept that some of these pictures are not absolutely sharp, but I want the picture. I want that the camera makes the picture, and when I press the shutter release, I want to get a picture even if it's not perfectly sharp. Doesn't matter, but I have the picture. And therefore, that's the reason why I use in the AFC priority selection the release option. Because when I use this one in AFC, I can press the shutter release and the camera makes a picture even if it's not sharp. You can check it here. I go to autofocus continuous. You can imagine here the camera doesn't get a sharp picture from this table because there's absolutely no point where the camera can focus on. But you see, I press the shutter release and the camera release, I get a picture. Now we make the cross check. We go to autofocus single, press the shutter release, and I can press the shutter release as often as I want. Nothing happens because the camera can't focus on the gray table here, and so I can press as long as I want. There's no release. So that's an important point for you. If you work with the camera, set it right, autofocus priority selection and autofocus single priority selection. These are two very important points you should set. One point is also important here, the number of autofocus points or of focus points. You can change between 51 and 11 points. It's not, you don't change from 11 to 51 autofocus points. In fact, that the camera doesn't work with a 51. You only change the positions where you can set the autofocus point. So if you have 11, you only have 11 positions where you can set the autofocus point. If you have 51, you have more positions, but the camera still works with 51 autofocus points. So these are the 2 points. Next point we have is the live view. What I showed you now was the normal autofocus. That's the focus with the face detection autofocus, where the camera is very fast and makes a very fast autofocusing. And there's a special focus module in the camera, and that's the face detection autofocus module. You can also go to the live view mode, and if you go to the live view mode, you see the picture here on the screen. You also have the focus point here, and you can move the focus point just to the corners of the whole screen. In the normal focusing, when you look through the viewfinder, you only have a center area where the focus points are. If you work in the live view mode, you have the complete field, the complete area where you can set the focus point. If you press the front button again, you see we have the different settings. Here we have AFF autofocus follow and autofocus single for the single shooting. And again, we have here different settings with the front dial. We have the normal size, and we have the follow autofocus, and we have the face detection, or face detection where the camera recognizes if there's a face in the scene, and we have the white area which we can also move around and put it to a certain point. I want to change the lens because in the German video I tried to show the the follow mode, but it won't work because I was too close to the subject, and I now try and hope it will work. Now I try to show you how the autofocus follow mode works. Now I go here to the setting autofocus single, and then this one, and now I press the button. I'm not quite sure if it works, if it's not too close, and if it's too, let's see. No, it's still not working. I tried this one also. You have to move a little bit more far away, then it will work. Usually when it works, the camera follows the subject, and you can move the camera, and the autofocus field follows the one, and so you can oh yes, here we are. No, it won't work, sorry. It's the gray table and the light here is too much. Usually you could fix these point in the scene and say, okay, this is the point where I want to set it, and then if you move the camera, or if the subject is moving, the camera follows the focus. But here in this scene, it won't work. So yeah, in German video, it also won't work. But I know that it works if you have a standard scene and you have a kid like running around, and then it will work, this follow mode. So the question is, when should I use the normal autofocus system and when should I use the live view system? That depends. When you have a scene like a still life, a fruit plate or something like this, you have macro photography, or you have a landscape and want a flower in the foreground and stuff like this, you work with a tripod, then it's very good to work with the live view mode, because you have one very important or one very nice option in the live view. I turn the monitor a little bit like this, turn on the live view, and now I turn the dial here on the front side to manual focusing. And when I go to manual focusing, you will see I turn the focus dial here, and I can focus on the scene. And there's one very important point. I can press the magnifying button here, and I can use the magnifier, and so I can focus absolutely perfectly here on the point. Imagine I have this on a tripod. It would be perfect, and I could see this perfect. When I'm in focus, I can move around this area, the magnifying area, and so I can work absolutely perfect and set the focus right on the point. And therefore the live view option is very good when I can work slowly, precise. I have to set my focus manual, and that's the situation when I use the live view. If I want to work fast, sports is one example, then I have to use the normal autofocus, because it takes too long to change from the live view to the picture and backwards. So there's too much time in between, and so it's not possible to work with the live view option when you have to make fast picture in sport action photography. In this situation, you have to use the normal way and not the live view. So these are the different options you have in the live view or in the autofocus mode. I want to show you some more things. I've got questions from my readers, and one question I've got a lot of times is why don't the camera doesn't have a bracketing function? Yes, we have a bracketing function, but honestly it's not so easy to find, because usually you look in the menus or you look here on the buttons of the backside, and there's a very small button here on the front side. It's called BKT, bracketing, and this one is the button where you can change the bracketing options. I will show you how this works. It's very easy to change. Just press the info button, then press the bracketing button, and you will see we have two settings. With the front setting we have the increment, and with the back dial we have the number of shots. We can go to 3, and then we have here the option to go up to 3 f-stops. The lowest value is 0.3 and the highest value is 3 f-stops. When I start here now and go up, you will see when I use 3 f-stops, the highest number of shots is 5. I have to lower the increment a little bit, then I can go up to 9 number of shots. So that's very easy when you know where the button is. That's very easy to change the bracketing function. Yes, but I know it's when you use the camera the first time and you're not a Nikon user, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to find it. One thing for the usage of the button, one point which I find very important is when you want to change, like here, the exposure correction. If you press the button, you see the value here. Now I turn the dial and you see I can change it. When I release the button, release the button, now I can change this. It's exactly the same here. When I press the ISO button, I press the ISO button and you see I have the value here. I can change the value. When I release the ISO button, that's it. But there's another option. If you go to the menu and we go to the individual menu and we go to the controls, here in the controls we have the option to release button to use dial, and when we say yes, then you see the difference. I press the button and I don't have to hold the button. Now I can make the change and again have to press the button. Exactly the same for the buttons here, even if it's ISO, quality or white balance. I press the ISO button and you will see here is my ISO value. I can change the ISO value or I can change the auto ISO setting with the front dial, and if I want to release it, just press the ISO button and that's it. So I toggle on off, that's the one option, or hold, change, release, that's the other option. And as I said before, you find it under controls and release button to use dial. That's the point where you find it. Another important point is the assign AEL AFL button. Here you can change the setting of the AFL or AEL button, and you can say when I press the button I want auto exposure and autofocus lock, or I want only auto exposure lock, or I want auto exposure lock hold, or I want only autofocus lock hold. So that's very important to know. Usually when I work with camera, usually I have the auto exposure lock only, because the autofocus I use with the shutter release. So when I press the shutter release, I lock the autofocus with the shutter release, and I have only to lock the auto exposure with this button. And so that's my setting when I use the camera, or when I use cameras like this, that I use the setting like this, only auto exposure lock. So that's the way I work with the camera. The next important or interesting point I showed in my first movie, or in my first video, I will show again because it's very important. That's the movie setting, and in the movie setting you have the assign FN button and assign preview button. These are the two buttons here on the front of the camera. We have here the FN button and the other one, and I can set them with the setting power aperture open, and I set the preview button power aperture close. So what does it mean? When I'm in the video mode, I have to change here the dial to the video mode, press the live view, and now I'm in the video mode. When I press now the FN button on the front side of the camera and I'm in the setting A, aperture, or manual, then you will see that the aperture changes when I press the button. You see, now we are 2.8. Now I press the other button and the aperture goes up to the highest value of 22. Again the FN button and the aperture goes down to 2.8. To make a correct exposure, you will recognize that the ISO setting goes up. When I change from 2.8 up to 4, you see that the ISO setting goes up and up and up to get a perfect exposed picture. The problem is, yes, it works, but you will see small steps in the video. When the ISO value changes and goes up or down, depends if you change the aperture up or down, then you will see light steps in the video. So it's not smooth. Maybe you can correct this in the post-production, but in the original video it's visible that there are small steps when you change the aperture with the motor. But still, it's a nice feature. I like this one very much because usually you're not able to change the aperture in a way like you can do it here with the Nikon with the two buttons here. It's a nice feature. Maybe we get a little bit better quality and less steps in the next firmware version. But it's still a nice function of the camera. So these are the not most important, but these are some important points of the custom setting menu. One thing I will show you, that's the point, because I like this very much and I use it very often when I doesn't shoot in RAW. When I shoot in JPEG, the picture control. When I use the picture control, there are a lot of settings. Let's have a look here at the landscape. When you're in the landscape, you have a quick adjust, or you can change the sharpening, clarity, contrast, brightness, saturation, and hue. So you have a lot of options to individualize your picture, and you have a lot of options to make the JPEG real nice and get a real nice JPEG quality picture. If you go to the monochrome setting, there's one important point. I mentioned this, I think, in my other video too, and that's the filter effect. Here you can change to yellow, orange, red, and green, so you have different filter settings. What for is it good? When you make a landscape photography and you have a real blue sky, you can use yellow, orange, or red to make the sky in the black and white or in the monochrome picture real dark. If you use yellow, it's a little bit less. If you use orange, it's get a little bit darker. And if you use the red setting, the blue sky will get not absolutely black, but very, very dark. And so we have a real good contrast, or you can make a real good contrast if you shoot a forest with birds or something like this, with their white trunks. That's a real nice hard contrast, and so you should experiment with the different settings of the camera. The green is for portraits, so if you make monochrome portraits, please make the setting to green, because if you make the setting to green, you get a real nice skin tone, and the skin tone is real. It's a real skin tone. It's not too dark, it's not too light, but it's a real nice skin tone you get when you use the green filter in the monochrome setting of the camera. Okay, so these are one of the most important settings or most interesting settings of the camera. There are lots more settings, especially in the individual functions. And if you want to work perfect with your camera, take your time, check the different settings of the camera, have a look in the individual settings. There are a lot of buttons and dials you can individualize and much more functions you can individualize. As better you know your camera, as better your pictures are getting. So this is one real important point. One point when I test my cameras, I get a lot of mails. Which lens did you use, or which lens can you recommend for the camera? And there I can give you a recommendation. When I get this camera for testing, there was the Nikon 24 to 70 millimeter 1 to 2.8 lens on the camera. I love this lens. I used it the whole time, and it's a real, in my opinion, a real perfect lens. You have the big aperture of 2.8, so you have a real small depth of field if you want to. You can almost work every time with available light, and have a real good opportunity to not to work with a flash, so that's it's absolutely nice, and the lens is, in my opinion, it's absolutely fantastic. If you're in the city, or if you're on holidays or anywhere else, you can use it. You have the 24 millimeter for landscape, for cities, for stuff like this. And you have the 70 millimeters also for portraits and stuff like this. So in my opinion, it's a real perfect lens. It's not lightweight, it's not a cheap one, but it's a real good lens. And I enjoyed it absolutely to work with this lens, because the quality is real perfect. Another lens I love to use, because I make a lot of landscape photography, is the new 20 millimeter 1.8. So that's the new one here, 20 millimeter 1.8. Also a real nice lens, because you can get real close to the scene. You have like less than 20 millimeter is the minimum focal distance. I can show you here. If I go to the live view mode, you will see that I can go very close. I go to manual focusing. So I go to manual focusing, and now you will see, sorry, my head is in the way, and now you see this is the closest point you can get with a 20 millimeter lens. So you can imagine, for landscape photography, it's an absolutely perfect lens to get the flowers in the foreground or stuff in the foreground and have the huge landscape in the background. You have the real good quality lens, which gives you absolutely high quality. And so the 20 millimeter is the new 20 millimeter lens, is also a lens, or my favorite lens to use with the D750. Yes, so that's my presentation, autofocus, and some more stuff of the D750 full frame sensor, 24 megapixel, real nice camera. I like this one very much. Unfortunately, it's only a test sample, so I have to bring it back to Nikon in the next days, but I like this one very much. And looking back on this year, it's one of my favorite cameras which I had this year. Hope you enjoyed it, hope it helped you a little bit to work better with your camera, and as always, as I always say, work, make pictures, check the pictures on the computer and check the different quality and so on. That's very important. That's absolutely important to learn your camera and to work with your camera. The best thing is when you have your scene, you don't have to think about the technique of the camera. You only have to focus on the scene and on the picture you want to make. That's the best thing, and then you have learned your camera perfectly and you know your camera perfectly. Thank you for watching. If you like my video, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel. As always, I say thank you for watching me, and bye and moin moin.